I'm Mayor Tommy Roberts. Welcome back to the Mayor's Table. My guest this morning is Lieutenant Casey Malone with the Farmington Police Department. Casey, it's good to have you as a guest this morning on the Mayor's Table.
Thanks, sir. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Casey, you've been involved in an effort to document and accumulate data regarding criminal activity in the city of Farmington over the last 4 years, and process of analyzing that data to determine trends in criminal activity. And that's what I want to talk about in more detail today. I think our viewers will be very interested in the information that you have. You've taken the opportunity to provide this information to the individual city councilors and to me here in the past month or so, and we all found it very interesting as well. But in general, people who live in our community will be concerned about the level of criminal activity that exists here. And I think this is a good opportunity to talk about some of the specific crimes that people are concerned about, and you have the data that will give them some idea about how those things are trending. Let's start out a little bit talking about our community. We have a population in the city of Farmington of about 45,000 people, and yet we have a police department that is staffed to an extent that's greater than most communities of 45,000 people. Why is that?
Well, I mean, there's several reasons. First, calls for service dictate largely how many officers an agency needs. And in the Farmington Police Department, we respond, in 2017, we're anticipating responding to approximately 90,000 calls for service. And that's not typical of a city with 45,000 residents, because we have such an influx of surrounding areas that come to the city limits of Farmington to shop and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. So we have documented, I think, that we have a retail population of around 250,000 people, and our economic development geographic area is even bigger in numbers, approaching about 300,000 people. Obviously, we never have that many people in town at one time, but we serve that many people on a geographic basis. We are the retail hub of San Juan County.
Yes, sir.
And that creates a lot of impacts on our police department and our police force, and
yes,
you see that every day. How many certified officers do we have currently?
So currently, I think we're floating roughly around 130 officers, right in that neighborhood. We're allowed to hire up to 137, so we're currently hiring to fill those vacancies, but I believe currently we're right around 130, 131.
Do you have any feel for what would be the typical staffing for a population of 45,000 people? I'm trying to get a sense and convey this sense to our viewers about how much impact the influx of people into our community, what impact that has on our staffing.
Well, if you compare it to a city that's similar in size, just population-wise, it would probably be somewhere in the 80 to 100 officer range, and so we're allotted up to 137. So anywhere from 50 to probably 30 officers more than what a similar sized city would have.
And I'm assuming that there would be a corollary relationship in the amount of crime or criminal activity that we have. In other words, you might expect a certain level of criminal activity in a population of 45,000 people, but when you have an additional several thousand coming into the community on a weekend, you would expect a corresponding jump in criminal activity during that period of time. Is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely fair, and not just criminal activity. I mean, traffic crashes in alone, just higher volume of people. There's going to be more crashes, and that requires more officers. So, yes, to answer your question, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So you've been involved in this process of accumulating and analyzing this data. And so let's jump into it here. And do you have any general observations to start out with?
The city of Farmington, our primary crimes that we deal with are property type crimes. We don't have a lot of violent crime. The violent crime that we do have is generally, associated with a certain segment of our population that choose those lifestyles. But property crime is definitely the biggest, issue that we deal with. And with property crime, narcotics plays a role in that. and things of that nature. So largely what we analyze and what we try and combat is property crime because it bleeds over into other areas as well.
Let's take it from there and let's focus specifically on one aspect of property crime, that's automobile theft.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look at those numbers here and let's see how they have progressed over the 4 years of your analysis and data accumulation. It looks like in what I would call fiscal year 2013, which would be July of 2012 to June of 2013, the number of vehicle thefts was just at 100. And then if we fast forward 4 years, it looks like that number is at 137, but a year ago it was at 164. So we've actually in the last year seen a decline of about 27
Yes, sir.
thefts. What observations do you have in that regard, in the general category of vehicle theft?
Well, I think it's important to point out that, we saw a decrease in auto thefts when the rest of the state, Albuquerque specifically has seen such a rise in auto thefts. And so, one of the biggest things that I think we can, I guess, credit that to is our social media presence. We're sending out ad campaigns. We're trying to remind people to lock your vehicles. Don't start your vehicle and let it warm up while you go back inside the house, because there's people that drive around, looking for cars to steal for that very specific. That's what they're there for. And so, I think better, our community is better, more aware, and I think that's a factor.
Well, it's got to be a situation where if people just take the simple precaution of locking their doors, that's got to help those numbers to some degree. So the social media campaign, the public service announcement campaigns, those kinds of things are helpful and do produce some results, I think.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about murder, homicide. I look at these numbers, and on an annual basis, I'm looking at 4, 2, 4, 1, and 2. My first reaction was I was a bit surprised that it's that low, and yet when I really think about it and what I recall reading about during a single year, you don't see too much about that kind of violent crime.
Yes, sir.
Are those numbers reasonable for our community and the population of our community?
Well, I think it's hard to say what's reasonable, but
it's probably not a good word.
It's consistent, across the 5 years that we have, and again, it just kind of points that violent crime, isn't, typically what we see here. We have violent crime. I mean, everywhere's going to have it, but it's not a community where you need to be afraid that, that's going to happen to you.
Yeah. As you've done this work of accumulating data and analyzing it, what jumps out at you as significant in the context of these numbers?
Well, what do you mean?
Well, is there anything that alarms you about the level of criminal activity in any particular area? Burglaries, larcenies, robberies, anything that jumps out to you as a reason to be concerned and a reason to be alarmed about the well-being of our citizens in this community?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that if you look at the categories, and we saw an increase in the number of rapes last year, and we don't have an exact reason why. We have theories as to why we saw an increase, and one of those theories is better reporting. There's just topic. It's in the media all the time. There's more avenues for people to report that they're victims of these type of crimes. And so, we like to believe at least that we're more accessible. People feel more comfortable coming to the police department and reporting crimes of that nature. So that one does stand out to me, that we did see, somewhat of a jump in that category. And then, that's never good, but
the simple assault numbers look like they increased in the last year by almost a couple of hundred
yes, sir.
reported incidents, investigated incidents. What do you attribute that to? Is there any way to identify the factors that lead to that kind of increase?
I'm not exactly sure why we've seen such an increase in simple assault. It's hard to say without, diving into those numbers and seeing if I can pick out a specific pattern or anything. We haven't done that with that category. We can. The reason we haven't is currently our focus is, or where we're kind of targeting is our burglaries. We feel like that's a crime that we can impact the most at this time with our resources, and that bleeds over into other categories as well. But so simple assault, I don't have a definitive answer for the increase in that.
Well, if we do look at burglaries and those numbers, in fiscal year 2015, we had 663 cases. In the next fiscal year, it dropped down to 616 cases. But again, what we tend to read about, what our citizens tend to read about in our local newspaper are these incidents of burglaries, and
Yes, sir.
they seem to be fueled and somewhat related to the drug
Yes, sir.
industry. And I think you've already spoken to that fact as a cause and effect type thing. Do the number of burglaries alarm you at all? Is that somewhat of a normal number for a community of our size?
Well, it's consistent, at least for the last 3 years. If you total up, our burglary numbers for the most recent year, and we're at 635, and so it's kind of in the middle between the previous 2 years. So it's consistent. Auto burglaries are our largest category. We see the most type of burglaries or cars getting broken into. And if I can just say that, I don't have the exact percentage, but the overwhelming majority of cars that get broken into are cars that are unlocked. Mm-hmm. And so we have people that walk through neighborhoods, that walk through apartment complexes, trailer parks, and they're just trying doors. And the doors that are unlocked, they're getting into the cars, they're rummaging through them, and that's our largest category of burglary. And so we need citizens' help, to remember to take their valuables inside, not to leave stuff that's out in the open, and to lock their doors, especially during the Christmas season, when you're out shopping and you're buying stuff at one store and then going to the other store. Just, hide those things, lock your doors, make an extra trip and take your valuables home before you go to a different store. Things of that nature will absolutely help our community as a whole.
I'm sure that you find the process of data gathering and analysis interesting.
Yes, sir.
I find it interesting to see the results. But I think the question is really, what do we do with this analysis? How does it help us with law enforcement and our policing activities, and how does it direct our decisions about how we police?
So, it's important to have what I like to call targeted enforcement. Officers out doing a specific task for a specific reason. And one of the things we're doing as an agency that's new is so 4 different lieutenants are assigned a district. The city limits of Farmington, when you look at it from the police department, we have it broken into 4 districts. And so there's a lieutenant assigned to each one of those districts. And each week, our crime analyst provides data to those lieutenants, a report kind of similar to this, but it's broken up in weekly reports. And so the lieutenants, they go over their district and they're looking for crime trends. If, for example, if we have, a half a dozen auto burglaries in this general area, that now may become our priority. And so what we do is we assemble a team from various areas within the department to go target that specific area to affect that crime. And that's something that's fairly new within our agency. We've only been practicing a few months. We're getting better and we're learning along the way. But to answer your question, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, so it's an ability to focus resources in a particular area, and it ultimately, we hope, results in prevention.
Absolutely.
Of some of these kinds of criminal activities. I think, Casey, I want to close with hopefully what would be a reassurance to our citizens. Obviously, as an elected official, I would like to be able to communicate to our citizens that they live in a safe community and that they don't have reason to be fearful for their well-being when they're out in the community doing the things that people do. What's your reaction to that
You know,
kind of a statement?
I was born down at San Juan Regional in Farmington. I have two brothers that live here, their wives, their family, my parents live here. You know, this is a community I feel safe in. I've lived other places. I've lived places where I didn't feel safe. I do feel safe here, and you know, and based on my job, you know, I see, you know, I think I'm an expert in that area,
Right.
for lack of a better
I
word.
think you are.
We have a safe community.
Yeah, and I like to think that people do feel comfortable when they're out doing the things that they should be doing. Clearly, a lot of bad conduct happens, and people are subjected to bad conduct when they're where they shouldn't be at a time when they shouldn't be there. So I think the message is that people who are doing what they should be doing are going to be relatively safe in this community. There's probably not a lot of random criminal activity that goes on in the context of violent crime. You know, the breaking and entries, the burglaries, they may be a bit more random, I would suspect, but as far as physical well-being, probably our citizens need to feel or should feel comfortable as long as they're where they should be.
Absolutely.
And doing the things they should be doing. Well, Casey, thank you for being my guest this morning on the Mayor's Table. I think this is the kind of information that our viewers will find interesting. And I think it's a topic that we want to revisit maybe in a year or so.
Yes, sir.
And I hope you'll come back and do that for us.
Appreciate it.
I want to thank all of you for being with us once again on the Mayor's Table. We hope you found this segment interesting. We'll look forward to seeing you again next Monday.